Orangutans live high in the trees of the tropical rainforests of Borneo and Sumatra. Today, populations are so few that orangutans may disappear completely within 1 decade. In the face of unprecedented threats to orangutans and their habitat, primate conservationists are working to rescue and rehabilitate orangutans who are displaced from their wild communities. Dr. Anne Russin, primate psychologist, has made startling discoveries about orangutans' powerful minds and complex cultures. Her research provides vital information for Dr. Willie Smits, who is committed to preserving orangutan habitat and returning captive orphans back into rainforest homes. Their visionary work is renewing hope in the struggle to bring orangutans back from the brink of extinction. Each year, more than 100 orphans are brought to the sanctuary of the Reset Orangutan Reintroduction Project, where they learn the skills they need to return to their natural habitat. We can only imagine the psychological impact of an infancy spent in captivity. At Reset, the orphans will finally get the assistance they need to return to free forest lives. Dr. Willie Smits founded the Reset Orangutan Reintroduction Project in 1991. His mission to save captive orangutans started from a chance encounter in an animal market.
I came across a dying orangutan baby at the market in Balikpapan, and the view of that just didn't leave my mind. So that evening I decided to go back to that market, and I found that baby gasping for breath on a garbage dump. They actually had thrown it away because it wasn't going to make it. So I picked it up, was chased by the people, anyway got it at home, kept massaging it, kept it alive, and then of course I was stuck with an illegal baby orangutan, which I wanted to return to the forest where it belonged. Shortly after that, a second orangutan baby was given to me to take care of, also sick, and I got 2.
From those 2 baby orangutans, Reset has grown to be the largest orangutan rehabilitation project in the world. Dr. Smits has now accepted more than 800 orphans for rehabilitation.
What she's doing now, she's pretending not to look at me and then just touching her head and going to the side, and then she comes sit next to me. She says hello. Now she smiles. She just had a beautiful smile. Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you again.
Dr. Anne Russin plays an important role in the program at Reset. With an intimate knowledge of orangutan intelligence and psychology, Dr. Russin understands how the captives suffer when they are wrenched from their normal social world.
When we destroy their habitat, or when we take orangutans out of their habitat, we're in fact destroying their cultures for them. You have to realize that when we took them captive, we broke Humpty Dumpty. We broke apart a very, very complicated system. The big problem for the ex-captives is they're caught between 2 worlds. They were born in a forest world with forest mothers, but then we took them captive and brought them into a human world. What the rehab programs then have to do is find a way of bridging those 2 worlds so that we can help them back into the forest world that they're entitled to live in.
For the ex-captives, Dr. Russin is a vital link back into the forest world. By studying orangutans who live in the forest, she helps tailor the program at Reset.
One of the loveliest times in the forest is very early in the morning. You wake up with the sun just starting to rise, and along with the sun coming up are gibbons singing. It's one of the most beautiful sounds I know of. It's a great haunting call that rings out over the forest, and that's what wakes the whole forest up.
For nearly 14 years, Anne has spent most of her research time deep in the rainforest of Borneo.
To come to some understanding of how they live in their world and how their minds work is, I find fascinating. I make a career of it. If I didn't have a relationship with the orangutans I follow, I couldn't follow them. They wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me come close to see what they do, which is what I need for my research. I get to know them as individuals. I almost have them as friends, so from my point of view, there's a real personal bond there. A lot of people like to think that humans are unique and there's nothing that compares with us. But you know, you go into a forest and you see an adult female orangutan standing up in front of you, almost with her hands on her hips, looking you right in the eye, and you know there's a powerful mind out there in front of you, and you can't feel superior anymore. It's a very humbling experience to do that. Because they think differently than we do, and because they feel differently than we do, you see the world from a different perspective. It's almost like living in another human culture.
We humans share 97% of our DNA with orangutans. Genetically and psychologically, they are one of our closest great ape relatives. And like us, orangutans rely on culture to learn the skills they need to survive.
They rely very heavily on storing information in their community as the basis for surviving or adapting to their habitat, so that it's not each individual that has to know all of the skills, all of the traditions of their area. They can rely on other individuals to have some of that knowledge.
In the wild, although communities are widely dispersed and interactions are few and far between, orangutans convey survival knowledge along complex networks of kin, friends, and mating partners.
Clearly, if you compare great ape cultures to human cultures, let's assume that you can both call them cultures, they are very different, obviously. But the human condition must have come from something. This is our opportunity to look sort of with a telescope into the past and try to figure out what got the ball rolling. We're losing that opportunity in the case of the orangutan. Over the last few years, we've seen basically almost a collapse of the population into remaining fragments. So we have less and less opportunity to study what is perhaps one of the most important questions in human evolution. Where does our culture come from? What conditions favored the evolution of culture?
20,000 years ago, 2 million orangutans ranged throughout Southeast Asia. Today, less than 20,000 orangutans remain in isolated pockets of rainforest in Sumatra and Borneo. In the last 20 years, 80% of orangutan habitat has been destroyed. The last 5 years have presented more threats than ever before to orangutan survival. Commercial logging is expanding unchecked. Clear-cutting for agricultural plantations diminishes rainforest habitat. Illegal mining degrades the thin topsoil into banks of white sand. An unprecedented wave of illegal logging has encroached upon national parks and protected areas. The opening up of the canopy created the perfect environment for fire when El Niño sent droughts to Borneo.
after the big climate problems in Borneo with the fires and the drought, people haven't had crops that have come in for a couple of years now. Now they're stuck with floods, so the crops are ruined again. If humans are desperate, they're going to be much less forgiving of orangutans. Orangutan comes into your garden and takes your fruit. I mean, if you're worried about whether you're going to survive till tomorrow, what are you going to do? Also, some people have been driven to hunt for bushmeat. That is, people going out and hunting wild animals strictly for food purposes. There are now more reasons to kill them than there used to be, rather than fewer.
So all of these factors together contributes to cultural erosion. Just like in humans, it is incredibly fragile. You can snip out culture just like that.
Human poaching further devastates the orangutan's cultural world by abducting infants from their mothers.
One of the main reasons that orangutans are captured and taken out of the forest is to supply the illegal pet trade. Orangutans will be transported to big cities like Jakarta and sold in open markets in the middle of the city. Really, the only way you can get a marketable orangutan to sell to the pet or the smuggling trade is to shoot their mothers and pull the babies off their bodies as the mothers are dying. In a lot of cases, the pet trade is even more serious for species that are close to extinction like the orangutan, because as they become more and more rare, they become more and more valuable. Whether it's the forest or orangutans or the birds, predation in general is the problem. It's the problem that humans think that everything is open for humans to take what they want from.
Conservationists have been trying to repair the damage to captive orangutans since the 1960s. Early rehabilitation programs simply released ex-captives into the rainforest, but allowed them to move too easily between the forest and human world.
The rehabilitated orangutans were made free virtually as soon as they arrived, and they just kind of worked their way into whatever kind of life they wanted. You got orangutans that did the laundry, they washed the dishes. I saw one of them try to make a fire one time, and she came very close to succeeding. They used to regularly steal canoes and ride them down the river. I don't think anybody minded that, except of course they didn't bring the canoes back, so somebody had to go downstream to catch them.
Being a cultural species, orangutans easily adapted to the human world and made that the focus of their lives rather than the forest. This became a major problem in early programs.
These rehabilitants have spent a lot of their life with humans, and they may see themselves more as humans than as orangutans.
Of course, in terms of rehabilitation, orangutans that focus on doing the laundry are probably not spending the amount of time they should climbing trees and making nests.
Experts have learned from the mistakes of past programs. Dr. Smith's rehabilitation is a caring but rigorous program. His sole aim is to give the captives back the forest lives that have been taken from them. Dr. Smith's program gives orphans no other option but to learn forest skills and to relate to other orangutans. With the large numbers of orangutans showing up on the international pet trade, Dr. Smiths leads teams of forestry police who undertake the dangerous task of confiscating infants from animal markets, smuggling rings, and private homes.
This one's from Kutai National Park. He's in extremely good condition. I seldom seen confiscated ones this good condition.
But not all orangutans arriving at Wana Reset are in such good health.
When orangutans are first received at the rehabilitation center, they're put through very extensive medical checks and quarantine to make sure that they're healthy, and if not, to treat them. And also a number of identifications are carried out so that we, for example, take hair samples, check their teeth, check their body size and measurements, just to make sure that we know who they are and can track them through the rest of their lives.
70% of the orangutans that arrive have medical problems that need to be dealt with first. If it's still a very young baby, first it must get rid of the stress of losing its mother. So the girls keep the babies with them almost all day long. There's 24 hours around-the-clock care. So the first weeks at the center are very, very critical to get them to eat quickly and get rid of their stress.
For every orangutan that enters a rehabilitation program, an estimated 5 others have died. Those include mothers who were killed or infants who didn't make it through the captive process. That means that the 800 orphans received at Wana Reset and those who died represent as much as 20% of the world population of orangutans. Many captive orphans have little or no idea of how to survive in the rainforest. Dr. Russin follows particular individuals as they journey through the rehabilitation process.
There are some orangutans that have personal qualities that you could almost think of as a personality that help them reconstitute their worlds so that they can, in fact, readapt to the forest. One of my favorite characters, though, that was really a great example of all the complexities involved in doing that was Siti. She'd been taken captive, I think, when she must have been well under a year old, because we got her when she was still a tiny little baby. Because she was so young, she'd have had virtually no memory of ever having lived in the forest or even having lived with other orangutans. So she really had to start from scratch. She used her new orangutan friends at Wana Reset to give her comfort and security, and she also used them to show her how to do things and to provide her new avenues of learning. So what you saw at the end of all that was a little individual who really started with nothing, but she really set up her own social and learning systems very, very well.
Siti was well on her way to learning the skills she would need in the forest. But Wana Reset was overflowing with orphans, and new arrivals had no place to go. With guidance from Dr. Smiths, Lona Drosha Nielsen and her husband Odom created an additional center.
All the babies we have here, all the orangutans we have here, have lost their mothers in what I should think is a very traumatic experience for any living being. We can see it with the smaller ones. They cry in their sleep. They wake up screaming sometimes. I think it's very important that we mimic their normal behavior as much as we possibly can. I mean, that is why I have girls sitting bored to death sometimes in a hammock, because that is what the mother would do, would be sitting, and the baby would feel comfortable that the mother was not going to move from there. They very quickly learn that my mother is sitting in a hammock, so she's not going to run away, so I can climb. Once the girl stands up, they very often come screaming out of the trees.
Since an infant orangutan is dependent on its mother for at least 7 years, the duties of an adoptive human mother are daunting.
Yeah, she's coming to find Ibu Ero. Come on, we go and find Ero, yeah? Whoa. She's in here, but she's making sugar, yeah? Her favorite mother left her because it's always very also distressing for the mothers to be carrying around these babies all the time. You sort of feel like you're really sort of tied down. And since Ero went up to make her some milk, she got really, excuse my language, pissed off about it, and just wanted to come along. Look who's coming there. So now she's happy again. You want to drink when Ibu gives it to you? Yeah. You see, then she will drink, yeah?
A wild orangutan baby has so much to learn. And we tend to underestimate how much is actually learned socially. And of course, the focus of a wild orangutan is the mother. The infant is always keeping a close eye on what mother is eating, gets stuff out of the mother's mouth to sort of learn the taste of things as it's still very small. So there is an enormous amount of social learning going on, even in the mother-infant context. What rehabilitation has to do is to try and recreate that, because most of these animals were taken when they were very small infants. And so they've got this enormous gap in schooling, so to speak, and we have to make up for that.
It's easy enough for us to go out and find various foods in the forest that we know wild orangutans eat, give it to them, and they will test it. There are many other aspects that I do think that we cannot teach orangutans, such as being wild, being up in the canopy, learning to climb the trees the right way, learning to get from one tree to another, which tree can carry the weight and which one can't. We cannot teach them any kind of social behavior in the sense of any encounters with other orangutans. How do they communicate with them? By telling them, get out of my area, or yes, I would like to be a friend with you. We can share this tree together. I don't think we can teach them things like that.
Because there are some essential skills humans cannot teach ex-captives. Back at Wanna Reset, Dr. Smits focuses on fostering learning through orangutan peer groups.
This playground is quite special. There are all kinds of interconnections, so everything here is also built with the idea that they need to learn to solve problems in order to survive better out there in the forest.
The skills that orangutans learn are learned actually in quite a number of different ways. They learn things socially by either watching another individual who knows or working with them. They learn by trying to figuring things out all on their own. And sometimes they actually learn just by playing. Sometimes you'll see a little guy climb a tiny little tree that's way too small for their weight, but all of a sudden the thing falls over. They'll climb back up again and try it again. Before you know it, when they've done that several times, they learn to manage and control it and come out with a new skill.
When I want them to learn a new kind of leaf, I can also try to get their attention and then eat it myself. Now he has never eaten lugia. Now he's very interested and he's soon gonna take it from me. And now they do it exactly on the front of the lip, and they have studied the shape of that leaf And they will remember this for years and years to come. This short lecture, they will remember.
At Wana Reset, when older infants and juveniles are emotionally secure, they are moved into large cages with a group of orangutans of about the same age and size.
Then they go in small groups together, and then play is initiated. They should never get bored, because they have to survive with their intelligence. So they must be stimulated, and that's why we have enrichment at the station. We have little puzzles, little toys. We have to solve problems to keep them occupied and let them know that thinking is a rewarding process.
In the cages, juveniles develop social skills by competing for food, much as they would in the wild. Peer groups form as the youngsters make friends and establish social roles.
They of course have to have a group of orangutans that knows each other, so that later when they are settling in their own territories they can still meet up. I think that this group forming is vital for a better chance of surviving.
An individual's temperament or personality can make all the difference to social learning. Dr. Russin was eager to observe Siti's progress once she was moved into a socialization cage.
She had a temperament that really gave her a big boost in terms of her chance of getting somewhere, because she really wanted to learn things. Some of them are timid and hide back a bit, but not Siti. She'd be down there beating it out with the boys when all the other little females were hiding. She'd be right in there because she wanted to see how things were done.
At Nyaru Menteng, this youngster is making her first big move back into a true forest habitat. Lona and Odom lead Inung from the socialization cage and transport her to a securely fenced patch of forest called a midway house.
This is the very first time Inung has actually come down here to the Midway house, and we suspect that she has not been climbing trees ever since she was taken from her mother. She was pampered in the house that she was in. So we're very curious to see whether she's going to make nests or what's going to happen to her.
Many of these orangutans have not lived in a truly wild environment since they were infants. Now they can explore the forest with assistance from humans and other orangutans until they are ready to live independent of human support.
Well, she's got everybody else behind her. Everybody wants to snip her. Inung is right now maybe being stressed a little bit because she's got 4 other orangutans after her. But looking at her now, I think she'll be okay. It's just in the beginning they always chase them So we'll see how it works out over the next couple of hours, just to see if she's too afraid with them or whether they're too rough with her. This is so funny. Oh, chop, chop, chop! These ones here are the youngest group that has been released in the Midway House area. They're doing extremely well. And this one we have here is Nor. Nor is very, very curious. She's very naughty. There is a couple of other girls, female orangutans, I guess, and they go off up to sometimes a whole day. They'll be off finding their own food, making nests, occasionally having slept out at night also. I actually tell the girls here to tickle the orangutans to make them laugh. They must laugh at least 10 minutes a day, because their mothers always do this. Nor, we actually had staying in our house for 4 months while she was still quite small. And it was a very long process of getting her down here in the Midway House, because she had gotten quite attached to me. It took a long time, it took a month and a half before I was able to actually stay away for a whole day. She's doing really, really well, so she's going to be really good in the forest, this little one. She has a lot of self-confidence and is more or less the boss of this group. I do think it is very important that we consider their personalities when we rehabilitate them, because you can easily have a 2-year-old who would adapt to the forest very readily, while a 7-year-old who has been in captivity most of its life is not going to adapt to the forest. It's going to take a very long time. This one here is Kiron, and he's extremely adapted to humans, unfortunately. He likes to walk on the ground, walk upright. So he's going to be one of these that are going to be quite difficult to get back in the wild. This is Jambi. She came in almost half dead, had been sort of like thrown as a piece of garbage under the house of somebody, and been living off scraps that was meant for the dogs. The only thing she really liked to eat was newspaper. But she eventually, after 1 week with us, she woke up one morning and just drank a whole bottle of milk on her own. We're fortunate enough to have a wild orangutan here. Her name is Awa. Because she came straight from the forest, she still has most of her skills with her. She's extremely good at making nests. Occasionally, we have noticed that Komo and Samba are following her. In the beginning, they used to steal her nest. Then they started repairing on it, and then they eventually started making their own. So they are definitely learning from her, and these are the things that we cannot teach them. I do think that nest building is part instinct, but also part learning. It looks as if very, very small babies even have the capability of making very rudimentary nests, even down to the age of 7-8 months. We have actually seen them try to gather things around them. Whether they have this is from learning from the mothers up to that age is very hard to tell, or whether it is some sort of instinct. But orangutans who has been in captivity for a very long time, that you should think have actually forgotten how to do it, they still manages to make very rudimentary nests.
At the end of each day, the juveniles are carried into night shelters to sleep. These orangutans are almost ready for full release into the rainforest. But until a suitable habitat can be found, they will remain in the Midway House, supervised by human caretakers.
The problem is, it is very, very difficult for us to find a release site in this area, because almost all forest in central Kalimantan is being logged. Unless we get some kind of big funding to protect an area, like with people actually guarding the border, then we're not going to be able to release them safely into the forest again.
One of the few remaining pockets of protected habitat is the Maratus Forest in eastern Borneo.
Well, here we are at the Maratus Release Forest. It's the forest that the Orangutan Reintroduction Project has been using for the last 2 years and a bit now to release orangutans. Just getting up to the released forest is an adventure on its own. It's a trek along logging roads on a four-wheel drive, sometimes riding over log bridges that you're sure are going to break under the car when you're right in the middle. It takes about 5 or 6 hours on the best of days. And once you get out of the car at the other end, you have a trek of probably an hour through the forest, onto a cable car, and you have to slide your way on the cable car all the way across the river before you ever get to the post where you stay. And Bento, the king of the castle up in the released forest, is very commonly waiting right beside the cable car to watch you as you come swishing into the camp.
Each day, researchers and technicians go into the forest to monitor the ex-captives as they navigate the challenges of forest life. Imagine being let loose in the supermarket and not recognizing what is food amidst all the packaging. Without elders and mothers to guide them, newly released orangutans will walk past foods that they should in fact recognize.
You get some characters like Gomez, who's just newly released and doesn't really quite know what to do with himself. In the morning, he's likely to be lurking around the post where he shouldn't be, trying to steal some food, which is what he shouldn't be doing. He's the one who goes up trees, makes 3 nests, never sits in one, and goes and sits and sleeps in somebody else's nest. I think his trouble is he just doesn't know very much. He just doesn't know that many things to eat. He doesn't go very far. He doesn't seem to know the forest very well, so he's very careful about where he goes. He just doesn't have a plan, is what we decided. He just doesn't quite know what to do with himself.
Itu sekitar 35 orang utan yang kita lepas di kandang 3. Itu mereka sudah tidak ada semua, pergi semua. Sebagian cuma Gomez saja yang berada di sini. Karena jalan satu-satunya kita pernah bawa ke hutan jauh misalnya, ke lokasi yang tidak tahu dia dilepas supaya dia beradaptasi dengan hutannya. Tapi dia tetap mengerti, dia tahu di mana ada camp, tapi dia pasti ingat.
One of the things that you see in the forest now is the same kind of world that was described in the book The Lord of the Flies. It's a very peculiar world peopled only by children, where children run everything. There are no adults, there are no mothers, there are no wise men, there are no babies even, and no adolescents, just a world of children trying to run their own lives.
Out of this Lord of the Flies community, peculiar orangutan child kings have emerged, like Bento, who is only 10.
He thinks he's the king, and he acts nothing like a 10-year-old orangutan would act in a wild community because he doesn't have any of the normal adult members of the community to put him in his place.
Anne has followed Bento for more than 5 years.
I remember watching him stripping bark. And in fact, I think he is still virtually the only orangutan in the Maratas community that knows how to get that food. Mono has actually been filmed watching Bento very, very intently, getting that food himself, watches for a while, then comes and tries to get it on his own. In fact, it turns out that to have a very knowledgeable, if you like, senior member of the community can be very important for new arrivals. so that there's somebody there that actually knows the area and knows the foods and knows, for example, where you nest and where you find water, is somebody who's very valuable for new ones because they learn off the old-timers. Watching them live up in the air is almost like a slow-motion ballet sometimes. They almost sometimes look like they can walk on air.
Even with support from humans and other orangutans, the forest can be fraught with hidden dangers. Toxic foods can be hard to recognize, and ex-captives may not understand that predators inhabit the forest floor.
The first group that we released, we had Buddha and Romanis. They always made nests together, slept together. They were really close friends. And then after about 3 months, all of a sudden Buddha wasn't there. And Romanus was sitting a little away from the path, and he was crying and attracting attention. And they found right under the tree where Romanus had been crying, they found Buddha. He had fallen from a tree, broken his shoulder, and a pig had ripped open his belly, and he had died there. And after that, for a month, Romanus would just be sitting there, not willing to go anywhere and to eat. He was extremely missing his pal, Buddha.
When Siti was released from rehabilitation, Anne continued to watch her as she faced the ultimate challenge of moving into a full-release forest. Siti had to learn that she wouldn't be put back into a cage at night, that she really did have to make her own nest, navigate her way around the forest, and find her own food.
She worked for 5 full hours, tearing apart one stalk of one leaf on one palm. So she was so dedicated on getting her skills going that she would invest that much time in working up her skills.
Siti relied on the community of previously released orangutans for social support and new ways of learning.
She'd then go and make use of more expert individuals to help her learn things. So she'd follow the largest male in her area and be completely brazen and go in and steal food from him, and that way learn foods that she couldn't know otherwise. If she was a little lonely and wanted a sort of a big sister or a mother figure, she went and she borrowed Judy. So she had individuals to give her comfort and security, other individuals to provide her with new avenues of learning. And what I saw at the end was a little individual who started with nothing, but she had her own curiosity and the investment and effort in learning how to do things through practice.
Each year when Anne returns, she's especially eager to catch a glimpse of Siti, to see how she's managing.
We lost track of her for about 2.5 years and just found her again recently. So it's really interesting to see how much she's learned. She made it through that terrible drought and fires in 97 and 98 when she'd only been out here for about a year. So she really had very little experience in the forest to see her forward. She made it through. Here she is 4 years later, healthy, bigger, knows an awful lot, and pulled it off. This is another one of the rattans that the orangutans eat. It's probably one of the more nasty ones. It's got very vicious spines along the stem. Her ability to eat these is quite new. I don't know when, but she certainly couldn't eat these 2.5 years ago. So this is really probably very important for her as she grows up and needs more food to be able to get some of these really big ones. It's not all that unusual to see an orangutan eating termites, but it's kind of unusual seeing Siti eat them because she didn't used to be able to. How the orangutans get the termites is simply to crack the termite nest open and then they suck the termites from the exposed cells. So it's pretty simple, but you sometimes have to know a lot more than that, like where they are and how to get them off in the first place. In fact, one of the things she did today was take her termite nest and bang it against a tree. That used to be her idea about how you open the termite nests, and it doesn't work. The other day I was watching Siti, and this is one of the things she learned in the 2 years since I've seen her. She was opening a coconut and got to the little hole, the little soft spot where you can get into the nut itself. You could see that she was at the spot, but I guess she couldn't quite get through it, so she quickly broke down a branch to make a long stick, a very narrow stick, and punctured the little hole in the coconut to get inside. She did it very smartly, as though she knew exactly what she was doing. And she basically just made herself a tool, and that helped her with her food.
But the rehabilitation of one orangutan is not the end of this story. A living culture can only continue with the arrival of a new generation.
One of the very nice pieces of news in this forest is that some of the orangutans that were released in '92 and '93 are now old enough to start reproducing. 3 of the females in the forest now have babies. Ucha had one last year, and this year both Sariam and Tuti have brand new babies. So it's a big deal because it means that they are growing up well, they're successful, they're healthy. The other thing that's exceptionally nice is the mothers are taking good care of their babies. You know, first babies from the strange backgrounds they have could be a big problem. But in fact, they're all being very good mothers. So this is a very special piece of news.
A female orangutan bears only 3 to 4 offspring in her entire lifetime. She has the precious job of passing survival knowledge and cultural traditions on to her offspring, ensuring the ultimate survival of the species. Ucha, the very first orangutan Willie Smits rescued from the garbage dump in a market, was also the first he released into the wild.
I hadn't seen her for 3.5 years. And then I heard that she had been spotted again, just 2 months ago, with a baby. So I went into that forest immediately, and we actually found her. And she immediately recognized me, started crying and came down to me as if we had never been apart. And she actually gave me her baby in my hands and told me to smell it, pushing her baby in my face. And I was crying, of course. And after that, she pulled me in the brush and she went to a liquala palm and she bit off a leaf and gave me the leaf. And you know what? On that day, 23rd of May 1991, was exactly what I did. When we opened the release cage, she was sitting on top of the cage, afraid to go anywhere. And I took her with the arm to that liquala palm, bit off the leaf and sat and quieted her. And she told me, I remember.
I remember an expert on orangutans saying the very first day I arrived at Wana Reset that if the Orangutan Project was doing its job, it would close its doors in 2 years. I think that's an excellent aim, and I remember at the time thinking, not likely. Unfortunately, I think caring for orangutans between two worlds is something that we're going to be facing as long as orangutans are around.
The dedication of visionaries like Willie Smits and Ann Russin is the best chance orangutans have of returning to free lives in the forest. However, if the degradation of the rainforest continues, wild orangutans will inevitably disappear. We need decisive action to protect these orangutans and to make sure that the fragments of old-growth forests that are left are reconnected in due course.
The fact that we have orangutan rehabilitation proves that we are not doing the right thing out there in the forest where the wild orangutans are to survive. It's the wild ones who are still out there who are the most important, and we should try to shift a bit more attention to them.
My name is Brooke Shields. With your help, we can protect orangutan habitat and save orangutans from extinction. Thank you.